When Wendy and I first moved to Northern Ireland in October 2017, we brought very few of our possessions with us. Financially, shipping all of our possessions across the world was just not going to be worth it. And so when we heard the news that our initial visa had been accepted and I had permission now to come and work in Northern Ireland, we very quickly began to sift through all our possessions to determine which ones we would keep and which ones we would give away or donate to charity, which in the end was most of them. Arriving in Northern Ireland with very little stuff was in fact quite liberating. Obviously we needed some essentials which my mum had very kindly collected from various charity shops in preparation for our arrival. And we also received some very generous gifts from a few congregation members that helped us to begin to settle in and create a home. But having left many of our possessions and our furniture behind in South Africa made us realize that one's happiness does not depend ultimately on one's stuff. It was a period in which we experienced the teachings of Jesus that one's life does not consist of the abundance of one's possessions, and that in fact having less possessions can indeed be freeing and liberating. Now, since our first arrival in Northern Ireland, 5 years has passed, and as happens in life, during that time the number of our possessions has once again begun to grow, and our good intentions of wishing to live a simpler life have slowly been eroded away. Up until recently, I should say, because a few weeks ago Wendy sprung into action and began a program of clearing out again. Items that we have not used in 4 or 5 years have all come under the gaze of her scrutiny, and a few trips to drop things off at the charity shop have already begun to take place. My specific weakness is with books, and Wendy's desire for clearing out some of the unnecessary stuff in our cupboards has made me begin to look a bit more critically at some of the books on my shelves. I have not quite got there yet, but I can see that the time has come for me to critically look once again at the number of books on my shelves and to begin to prune them. Now, talking of books on my shelves, I picked up one just the other day called The Rules of Life by Richard Templer, and I so happened to open it to Rule 46, which says, which is entitled "Prune Your Stuff Regularly." If I was an evangelical Christian, I might have thought that God was speaking to me at that moment, and indeed, perhaps God was. Richard Templer writes the following words: "Collecting clutter clutters your home, your life, and your mind. A cluttered home is symbolic of cluttered thinking." And he goes on to say that pruning your stuff on a regular basis gives you a chance to get rid of anything that is useless, broken, out of date, uncool, uncleanable, redundant, or ugly. He says that having a good clear out refreshes you, revitalizes you, makes you conscious of what you are collecting, and anything that makes you more conscious is indeed a good thing. He suggests that one of the keys to living with success and clarity about our purpose in life comes in the ability to prune our stuff, to clear the clutter, to sort the wheat from the chaff, which is an interesting phrase that in fact comes from Jesus. He suggests that often those who are having trouble getting liftoff in their lives are those still running on the tarmac of their lives, clutching black plastic sacks full of useless stuff. As Wendy and I discovered when we first moved to Northern Ireland, there is indeed an unburdening effect that comes from this kind of pruning. Richard Templer writes, "You have more space in your home, a feeling of being more in control, and you get rid of that slightly overwhelmed feeling that comes with having piles of stuff accumulating everywhere. But this also doesn't mean that you have to live in a completely spotless house full of designer furniture and minimalist styling. Trying to live in the midst of perfection can be as emotionally overwhelming as having too much stuff. And all Richard Templer is really suggesting is that if you want to find out what's holding you back in life, start by looking in the cupboard, under the sink, under your bed, in your wardrobe, perhaps your spare room, or your garage. And it is a message that not only applies to our stuff, it's a message that could just as easily apply to many other dimensions of our lives. Is it possible to become overwhelmed in life by having too many things in our diaries that are just no longer life-giving? Is it also necessary sometimes to consider doing a clear out of some of our outdated thinking and beliefs? That if we examine them closely, we would realize that they are no longer serving us as they once did. We all need a clear out, sometimes of our external world, sometimes in our diaries, but also sometimes in our internal world. Today is, interestingly, the first Sunday in Lent, and Lent is traditionally a period in which Christians are invited to do some introspection, to consider our lives more closely, to turn from certain attitudes and behaviors that undermine or get in the way of our relationship with the divine and the abundant, joyful life that is our birthright as children of the divine. In the gospel passage that is set for today, Jesus is pictured as radically pruning his life for a period of 40 days as he goes into retreat in the desert. It is there that he seeks to determine what is really important in his life, determining what his true purpose is in response to his spiritual awakening that happened in the moment of his baptism. And he begins to find clarity of purpose when he returns to a life of utter simplicity. The cluttered thinking in his head becomes clear. The temptations that would make him veer off in a wrong direction becomes plain to him. And from this newfound clarity, Jesus is ready to begin to engage again with the world. But now, with a clearer sense of purpose and vocation than he had before. What overwhelms you in your life at this time? What kind of pruning may need to happen in your life today or over the next few weeks or months? Do you need to prune some of the stuff in your cupboards or your garage? Or is it the way you spend your time? Is it your diary that may need to get pruned? Or perhaps to question or examine carefully some of the old thoughts and beliefs that perhaps hold you back. Or maybe, for you, it is literally the roses in your garden that are waiting for you to attack them with your pruning shears. In John's Gospel, we read these words of Jesus from John 15. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. I'll read them again. I am the true vine. My Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. What could these words mean in your life today? May God bless you as you think upon and contemplate on these things. Amen.